What if the one thing holding you back isn't what you own, but what you can't let go of? Imagine living your entire life chasing approval, clinging to relationships, and shaping your every move around what others expect. Now, imagine breaking free from all of that, not by running away, but by changing the way you see the world. This isn't just a fantasy or a motivational slogan. It's a philosophy that's been tested for centuries, and it comes from one of the most legendary warriors in history. In the heart of Japan, over 400 years ago, a samurai named Miyamoto Musashi faced more than 60 life-or-death duels and walked away undefeated. But his greatest battle wasn't fought with a sword. It was fought within himself. A week before his death, Musashi wrote down 21 rules for living, a guide not for warriors, but for anyone who wants to master their own life. And at the center of these rules is one idea so powerful, so challenging, that most people can't even follow it for a single day: live without attachment. It sounds simple, right? But think about it. In today's world, especially in the United States, we're surrounded by messages telling us to hold on tighter, work harder, buy more, be liked, fit in. From the earliest days of American history, the idea of independence has been celebrated. But somewhere along the way, independence got tangled up with the need for validation. The pressure to succeed, to be admired, to never show weakness. It's everywhere, from the boardroom to the classroom, from social media to family dinners. What if the real secret to freedom isn't about having more but needing less? What if the path to true strength is learning to let go, not just of things, but of the invisible chains that keep us stuck? Today, you're going to hear a story that could change the way you see your own life. It's about a young man named Aiden, who seemed to have everything under control, but was secretly trapped by the need to please everyone around him. His journey began with a forgotten book in a quiet library, but what he discovered inside would challenge everything he thought he knew about happiness, success, and what it means to truly live. So before we dive in, ask yourself, what are you holding on to that's holding you back? Because sometimes the only way to move forward is to let go. And as you'll see, the hardest rule to follow might just be the one that sets you free. Most people think of attachment as something obvious, like holding on to a favorite old jacket, a childhood toy, or a car that's seen better days. But the real trap of attachment is much more subtle and far more dangerous. It's not just about the things we own. It's about the invisible threads that tie us to the expectations of others, the need to fit in, and the fear of standing out. In America, the land of opportunity, these threads are everywhere, woven into the fabric of daily life. From the time we're kids, we're taught to chase approval. In school, it's about getting the right grades, making the right friends, and never being the odd one out. Later, it's about landing the right job, driving the right car, living in the right neighborhood. Social media only makes it worse. Every like, every comment, every share becomes a tiny hit of validation, a digital pat on the back that feels good for a moment, but leaves us hungry for more. It's a cycle that never ends, and it's easy to get lost in it. But here's the thing, this isn't just a modern problem. The roots of attachment run deep in American history. Think about the pioneers who crossed the continent, risking everything for a new life. They had to let go of comfort, security, and sometimes even family just to survive. The founding fathers wrote about liberty and the pursuit of happiness, but they also warned about the dangers of becoming too attached to power, wealth, or public opinion. Even the American dream, for all its promise, can become a prison if we start measuring our worth by what we have instead of who we are. Yet, despite all this, most of us still find ourselves trapped. We say yes when we want to say no. We go along with the crowd, even when it feels wrong. We hide our true selves behind masks, afraid that if people saw the real us, they'd turn away. And the more we try to please everyone, the more we lose touch with what really matters. Our own dreams, our own values, our own sense of purpose, they get buried under layers of obligation and fear. This is the hidden trap of attachment. It's not about loving less or caring less. It's about losing yourself in the process of trying to be everything for everyone. It's about waking up one day and realizing you don't even recognize the person in the mirror. And in a country that prides itself on freedom, that's the cruelest irony of all. But what if there's another way? What if the key to real freedom isn't found in chasing more, but in letting go? What if the courage to walk your own path, no matter what others think, is the most American act of all? That's the question Aiden was about to face. And as you'll see, the answer would change his life forever. Aiden's story could be anyone's story. He grew up in a small American town, the kind where everyone knows your name and your business. His parents were the backbone of the community. His father worked long shifts at the local factory. His mother spent her days on her feet at the department store, always smiling, always polite. They taught Aiden the value of hard work, honesty, and doing right by others. But as he got older, Aiden realized that doing right by others often meant putting himself last. By the time he was 23, Aiden had checked all the boxes that were supposed to guarantee a good life. He had a steady job in an office downtown, a handful of friends from high school, and a reputation for being the guy you could always count on. If someone needed help moving, Aiden was there. If a friend wanted to go out for drinks after work, Aiden never said no. He was the glue that held his social circle together, the one who never let anyone down. But beneath the surface, he was exhausted. Every day felt like a performance. At work, he played the role of the reliable employee, never complaining, always picking up the slack. With his friends, he tried to keep up with the ones who seemed to have it all: nice cars, expensive vacations, the latest gadgets. He laughed at jokes he didn't find funny, spent money he didn't have, and pretended to be comfortable when he was anything but. The truth was, Aiden was terrified of being left behind. In a country that celebrates individualism, he felt more like a follower than a leader, always chasing someone else's idea of success. Then there were the friends who didn't have much, but didn't seem to care. They lived paycheck to paycheck, never planning for the future, always telling Aiden to relax and enjoy the moment. "Why worry so much?" they'd say. "Life's too short." But Aiden couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He wanted more, not just for himself, but for his parents who had sacrificed so much. He dreamed of building a better life, of giving back to the people who had given him everything. But every time he tried to focus on his goals, something or someone pulled him away. The pressure to fit in was relentless. If he skipped a night out, he worried his friends would think he was boring or stuck up. If he turned down an invitation, he felt guilty, like he was letting everyone down. Even when he had a rare moment to himself, his mind raced with thoughts of what he should be doing, who he should be helping, how he should be living. It was a cycle that never seemed to end. In many ways, Aiden's struggle is a reflection of the American experience. We're taught to believe in the power of choice, but so often, our choices are shaped by the expectations of others. We're told to be independent, but we're also told to belong. We're encouraged to stand out, but only if we fit in. For Aiden, the weight of these contradictions became too much to bear. He was living a life that looked good on the outside, but felt empty on the inside. He didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. All it would take was a quiet afternoon, a forgotten book, and a chance encounter that would force him to confront the truth he'd been avoiding for years. The truth that sometimes the hardest person to be honest with is yourself. For months, Aiden tried to break free from the cycle that kept him stuck. He bought self-help books, signed up for online courses, and made lists of goals he wanted to achieve. But every time he tried to carve out time for himself, life seemed to get in the way. There was always another text, another invitation, another small crisis that needed his attention. Even when he managed to sit down and focus, his mind wandered. He'd scroll through social media, comparing his life to the highlight reels of others, feeling more behind with every swipe. The harder he tried to change, the more trapped he felt. One Saturday afternoon, desperate for a break, Aiden decided to do something different. He grabbed his laptop and headed to the public library, a quiet place he hadn't visited since high school. The library was nearly empty, sunlight streaming through tall windows, dust motes dancing in the air. It felt like a sanctuary, a world apart from the constant noise of his daily life. He found a table in the back, opened his laptop, and tried to focus on an online business course he'd been meaning to finish. But within minutes, he was back on his phone, lost in the endless scroll. That's when he noticed a small black book sitting on the next table, its cover worn but cared for, gold letters catching the light. Curious, Aiden reached over and picked it up. The title was unfamiliar, Dokrodo, The Way of Walking Alone. He flipped to the first page and began to read. The words hit him like a punch. Don't cling to excessive desires. Don't depend on others. Don't get attached to anything, not even life. Each sentence was short, direct, and strangely unsettling. It was nothing like the self-help books he'd read before. There were no promises of quick fixes, no sugar-coated advice, just a stark challenge to let go of everything he thought he needed. As he read, Aiden felt a strange mix of discomfort and curiosity. The book seemed to be speaking directly to the part of him that was tired of pretend, tired of chasing approval, tired of living for everyone but himself. He was so absorbed that he didn't notice someone approaching until a quiet voice broke the silence. "You found my book." Aiden looked up, startled. Standing across from him was a young woman, about his age, with straight black hair and calm, observant eyes. She wore simple clothes and carried a cup of coffee, her presence both gentle and confident. Embarrassed, Aiden quickly apologized and handed the book back. But instead of being annoyed, she smiled and slid into the chair across from him. "It's okay. Most people don't even notice it," she said. Hana, they started talking first about the book, then about life. Hana explained that the author, Miyamoto Musashi, was a legendary samurai who wrote these 21 rules a week before his death, not as a guide for fighting, but as a guide for living. She told Aiden how the book had helped her break free from her own struggles with expectations and people-pleasing. For the first time, Aiden felt like someone understood what he was going through. Not just the surface-level stress, but the deeper sense of being lost. Their conversations stretched on, the library fading into the background. Hana's perspective was different from anything Aiden had heard before. She didn't talk about detachment as coldness or isolation, but as a way to find your true self beneath all the noise. She spoke about making choices for yourself, not out of fear or obligation, but out of honesty and self-respect. By the time they said goodbye, Aiden felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Before she left, Hana offered to lend him the book. "I think you need it more than I do right now," she said, scribbling her number on a scrap of paper. "If you ever want to talk about it, just call." Aiden left the library that day with a book in his hands and a sense that maybe for the first time, change was actually possible. In a country built on the idea of reinvention, Aiden was about to discover that the hardest part isn't starting over, it's letting go of who you think you're supposed to be. And sometimes all it takes is a single moment, a single conversation to set you on a new path. Aiden spent the next few days with the book never far from his side. He read it on the bus to work, during his lunch breaks, and late at night when the world was quiet. The words were simple, but the meaning behind them was anything but. Don't depend on others. Don't seek pleasure for its own sake. Don't get attached to anything, not even life. At first, these ideas sounded almost un-American. After all, wasn't the pursuit of happiness a founding principle? Wasn't community, family, and ambition at the heart of the American story? But as Aiden dug deeper, he realized Musashi wasn't telling people to isolate themselves or stop caring. Instead, he was challenging the very foundation of what it means to live freely. In the United States, freedom is often defined as the ability to do what you want, when you want. But Musashi's rules suggested a different kind of freedom, the kind that comes from not being controlled by your own desires, fears, or the opinions of others. Aiden met up with Hana again, this time at a small coffee shop near the library. The place was filled with the hum of conversation and the smell of roasted beans, but their table felt like its own world. Hana explained that detachment wasn't about shutting people out or living without love. It was about not letting your sense of self be built on the shifting sands of other people's approval. "It's like this," she said, stirring her coffee. "If you're always worried about what others think, you're never really free. You're just a reflection of everyone else's expectations." She told Aiden about her own journey. Growing up, she'd always tried to be the perfect student, the perfect friend, the perfect daughter. She'd said yes to everything, afraid that saying no would mean losing people she cared about. But the more she tried to please everyone, the more she lost sight of who she really was. It wasn't until she started following Musashi's principles, learning to say no, to set boundaries, to make choices for herself, that she finally felt at peace. Aiden thought about how this idea fit into the American experience. The country was built by people who dared to break away from the crowd, who risked everything for a chance to live on their own terms. Yet, in modern life, it was so easy to get caught up in the race for more money, more friends, more recognition. The pressure to keep up, to never fall behind, was everywhere. But Musashi's philosophy offered a radical alternative. What if you could be content with less? What if you could find strength not in what you owned or who you impressed, but in knowing who you truly were? Hana handed Aiden a notebook. Write down what you really want, she suggested. Not what you think you should want, or what your friends want, or what your parents expect. Just you. It was harder than Aiden expected. For so long his dreams had been shaped by everyone else. But as he wrote, he started to see a different path of life where he could choose his own direction, even if it meant disappointing others. This was the heart of Musashi's message. Detachment wasn't about being cold or distant. It was about having the courage to live honestly, to let go of the need for constant approval, and to trust that the right people would stay. In a country that values independence, this was the ultimate test. Could you be true to yourself, even if it meant walking alone? Aiden didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time, he felt like he was asking the right questions. And as he left the coffee shop that day, the world seemed a little less heavy, and his own path a little more clear. Change, even when it's desperately needed, rarely comes easy. For Aiden, the first steps toward detachment felt like walking a tightrope without a safety net. He started small, just as Hana had suggested. The next time his friends invited him out for drinks on a weeknight, he paused before answering. Instead of the automatic "sure, I'll be there," he took a breath and simply said, "Not tonight." The silence on the other end of the line was heavier than he expected. There was confusion, maybe even a hint of disappointment. But for the first time, Aiden didn't rush to fill the gap with excuses or apologies. He let the silence stand. At first, the pushback was subtle. Friends joked that he was becoming a hermit, or teased him for being all work and no play. Some tried to guilt him back into old habits, reminding him of inside jokes and shared memories. In American culture, where loyalty to your group is often seen as a badge of honor, stepping away can feel like a betrayal. But Aiden remembered Hana's words. If people drift away when you stop pleasing them, maybe they were never really your people. It was a hard truth, but it gave him strength. He used the time he reclaimed to focus on things that mattered to him. He dusted off an old business idea, a digital consulting service for small businesses, and started sketching out a plan. For years, he'd told himself he was too busy, but now he saw that most of his busyness was just a way to avoid disappointing others. As he poured his energy into his project, he felt a new sense of purpose. The work was challenging, but it was his. Every small victory felt like a step toward the life he actually wanted, not the life he thought he was supposed to live. But the challenge of change wasn't just about saying no to others. It was about facing the discomfort that came with being different. In the United States, there's a deep-rooted belief in the power of the individual, but there's also a powerful undercurrent of conformity. From high school cliques to corporate culture, the pressure to fit in is everywhere. Aiden felt it every time he turned down an invitation, every time he chose to spend a night work instead of socializing, every time he admitted he didn't want what everyone else seemed to want. There were moments of doubt. Sometimes late at night he wondered if he was making a mistake. What if he ended up alone? What if he lost all his friends? What if, after all this effort, he still wasn't happy? But then he'd remember the words from Musashi's book. Don't get attached to anything, not even life. It wasn't about giving up on people or dreams. It was about not letting fear dictate his choices. Slowly, things began to shift. Some friends faded away, but others stuck around, and those relationships grew stronger, built on honesty instead of obligation. His parents noticed the change too. At first, they worried he was isolating himself, but as they saw him become more focused and confident, their concern turned to pride. Aiden realized that true connection didn't come from always saying yes, but from being real about who you are and what you need. This process of change, of letting go, of standing alone, of choosing your own path is woven into the American story. From the earliest settlers who left everything behind for a new world, to the civil rights leaders who stood up against the status quo, the courage to break away from the crowd has always been at the heart of progress. But it's never been easy. It takes grit, resilience, and a willingness to face discomfort head-on. For Aiden, the challenge of change was far from over, but with every step he felt a little lighter, a little freer. He was learning that detachment wasn't about losing everything, it was about finally having the space to find what truly mattered. And as he looked ahead, he realized that the hardest part of the journey was also the most rewarding, the chance to build a life that was truly his own. As the weeks passed, Aiden's world began to shift in ways he hadn't expected. The more he practiced detachment, the more he realized that real connection wasn't about constant togetherness or endless approval. It was about honesty, respect, and the freedom to be yourself. This was a lesson that ran deeper than any self-help book or motivational quote. It was something he saw reflected in the people who mattered most, especially Hana and her family. Hana and Aiden started meeting regularly, sometimes at the library, sometimes in the park, sometimes over coffee in small, out-of-the-way diners that felt like hidden gems. Their conversations were different from anything Aiden had experienced before. There was no pressure to impress, no need to fill every silence with words. Hana was open about her own struggles, her fears, and the way she was still learning to let go. She didn't pretend to have all the answers, and the honesty made Aiden feel safe enough to share his own doubts and dreams. One evening, Hana invited Aiden to dinner at her grandparents' house. The invitation felt both casual and momentous, a step into a world shaped by traditions and values that were both foreign and familiar. When he arrived, he was greeted by a small, tidy home filled with the scent of home-cooked food and the quiet presence of a family that had weathered storms together. Hana's grandfather, Akira, was a man of few words but deep wisdom. Her grandmother, Sakura, radiated warmth and kindness. The meal was simple rice, miso soup, grilled fish, but every detail spoke of care and intention. After dinner, as they sipped green tea, Akira asked Aiden about the book. "What did you think of Musashi's rules?" he asked, his eyes sharp but kind. Aiden hesitated, then admitted that the rules felt both inspiring and impossible. How can anyone live without depending on others? He wondered aloud. Akira smiled, a knowing glint in his eye. "The question isn't how to live without others," he said. "It's how to live without losing yourself." Sakura added softly, "Detachment isn't about loving less. It's about loving without fear, without the fear of being alone, or the fear of not being enough." Their words echoed something deeply American, the idea that true freedom comes from within, not from the approval of others. Aiden thought about the history of the country he called home. The United States was built by people who valued independence, but also by communities that thrived on mutual respect and support. The pioneers who crossed the plains, the immigrants who built new lives from scratch, the activists who fought for justice, all of them understood that real connection wasn't about blending in or giving up your identity. It was about standing strong in who you are and finding others who respect you for it. With Hana, Aiden found a relationship that was lighter, freer, and more genuine than anything he'd known before. They supported each other's dreams, but didn't try to complete or fix each other. There were no games, no silent expectations, no keeping score. When disagreements arose, they talked them through, trusting that honesty was more important than always being right. The more Aiden let go of the need to please, the more he found himself surrounded by people who valued him for who he truly was. This new way of connecting extended beyond his relationship with Hana. At work, Aiden stopped pretending to agree with everything just to keep the peace. He spoke up when he had ideas, and he didn't shy away from difficult conversations. Some colleagues respected him more for it, others drifted away. But the relationships that remained were stronger, built on mutual respect rather than convenience. Aiden's journey mirrored a truth at the heart of the American experience, that the most meaningful connections are forged not through conformity, but through authenticity. The country's greatest moments, its breakthroughs, its movements, its cultural revolutions have always come from people who dared to be themselves, even when it meant standing alone. By embracing detachment, Aiden discovered that true connection isn't about holding on tightly. It's about giving others the freedom to be themselves and claiming that same freedom for yourself. In a world obsessed with more friends, more followers, more approval, learned that the deepest bonds are built on less fear, less pretense, less need to control. As he left Hana's grandparents' house that night, Aiden felt a quiet sense of belonging, not because he had finally fit in, but because he had finally found the courage to stand out. And in that moment, he understood that the power of true connection comes not from attachment, but from the freedom to walk your own path, side by side with those who truly see you. Aiden's journey toward detachment didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, sometimes painful process marked by small victories and setbacks. But as the months passed, the changes in his life became impossible to ignore. The more he let go of the need to please everyone, the more he discovered what truly mattered to him. And as he built his new life, he realized he was living out a story as old as America, itself a story of reinvention, resilience, and the courage to walk a different path. The first and most obvious change was in his relationships. The friends who had once filled his calendar with endless invitations began to notice the difference. Some drifted away, unable to understand why Aiden no longer dropped everything to join them at the bar or the latest party. At first, their absence stung, but as time went on, Aiden found himself surrounded by a smaller but far more genuine circle of friends, people who respected his boundaries, supported his ambitions, and valued him for who he was, not just for what he could do for them. His relationship with Hana deepened, growing stronger with each honest conversation and shared experience. They celebrated each other's successes, comforted each other in setbacks, and gave each other space to grow. There was no pressure to be perfect, no fear of disappointing one another. Instead, there was a quiet confidence that came from knowing their connection was built on choice, not need. It was a love that echoed the best of American ideals: partnership without possession, support without suffocation, freedom without loneliness. Aiden's transformation extended to his career as well. With the time and energy he reclaimed from people-pleasing, he threw himself into his digital consulting business. At first, the projects were small, helping local shops set up websites, advising small businesses on social media strategies. But word spread quickly. Clients appreciated his honesty, his work ethic, and his willingness to go the extra mile. Within 6 months, Aiden was earning more than he ever had at his old job. He was able to help his parents with their bills, upgrade their health insurance, and even set aside money for their retirement. For the first time, he felt like he was truly honoring the sacrifices they had made for him. But perhaps the most profound change was internal. Aiden no longer measured his worth by the number of friends he had, the approval of his peers, or the size of his paycheck. He learned to trust his own judgment, to make decisions based on his values, and to accept that not everyone would understand or agree with his choices. There were still moments of doubt, nights where he wondered if he was missing out, or if he'd made the right decision. But those moments grew fewer and farther between, replaced by a growing sense of peace and purpose. Aiden's story is a reflection of the American spirit at its best. The United States has always been a place where people reinvent themselves, where second chances are possible, and where the freedom to choose your own path is a birthright. But that freedom comes with a price: the willingness to let go of what no longer serves you, to face the discomfort of change, and to trust that something better is waiting on the other side. In the end, Aiden's triumph wasn't about achieving some perfect version of success. It was about finding the courage to live authentically, to build a life that reflected his true self, and to connect with others on a deeper, more honest level. He learned that detachment wasn't about isolation or indifference. It was about making room for what really matters and letting go of everything else. As he looked back on his journey, Aiden realized that the hardest rule Musashi had written, live without attachment, was also the most liberating. It was a lesson that had transformed his life, and one that echoed through the history of his country: the freedom to choose, the strength to stand alone, and the power to build something new. As Aiden's story comes full circle, the true meaning of detachment becomes clear, not just as a personal philosophy, but as a way of life that echoes through the American experience. The United States has always been a nation of dreamers and doers, a place where people have crossed oceans and continents in search of freedom, opportunity, and the chance to start anew. But beneath the surface of every great American story lies a quieter, more difficult journey: the struggle to let go of what holds us back, to break free from the invisible chains of expectation, and to live with courage and authenticity. For Aiden, the lesson of Musashi's Dokudo was never about abandoning love, ambition, or community. It was about learning to live without fear of being alone, fear of disappointing others, fear of not measuring up. In a country that celebrates independence, it's easy to forget that true freedom isn't just about what you can achieve, but about what you're willing to release. The founding fathers spoke of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but they also knew that happiness can't be found in clinging to the past or in chasing approval. It's found in the quiet confidence of knowing who you are, and what you stand for. Aiden's transformation was a testament to this truth. By letting go of the need to please everyone, he discovered the power of choice. By stepping away from toxic relationships, he made space for genuine connection. By focusing on his own values, he built a life that was both meaningful and free. His journey wasn't easy. There were moments of loneliness, doubt, and discomfort, but each step brought him closer to the kind of freedom that can't be bought or given, only earned. This lesson is woven into the fabric of American history. The pioneers who left everything behind to build new lives in the West, the civil rights leaders who risked everything to stand up for justice, the innovators who dared to think differently, all of them understood that progress requires sacrifice. Sometimes it means letting go of comfort, security, or even the approval of those closest to you. But in doing so, they paved the way for something greater, a society where individuals are free to pursue their own paths and where true connection is built on respect, not dependence. As Aiden stood at the threshold of his new life, he realized that the hardest part of detachment wasn't losing others, it was finding himself. He remembered the words Hana's grandfather had shared. Detachment isn't about loving less, it's about loving without losing yourself. In a world that constantly demands more success, more followers, more validation, Aiden learned that the greatest strength lies in needing less. The less you need, the less you can be controlled, the less you fear, the more you can truly live. So now the question turns to you. What are you holding on to that's holding you back? Is it the need for approval from friends or family? The comfort of routine, even when it no longer serves you? The fear of standing out or the fear of being alone? These are questions that every American and every person must face at some point. Because while the world may tell you to hold on tighter, history and Musashi's wisdom remind us that sometimes the only way to be truly free is to let go. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect. What would you change if you knew you only had a week to live? What dream would you finally pursue? What truth would you finally speak? The first step toward transformation is admitting where you're stuck. The next is daring to let go. Aiden's journey began with a forgotten book in a quiet library, but its lesson is timeless. In the end, freedom isn't just an American ideal, it's a personal revolution. And it starts the moment you decide to live without attachment, not because you don't care, but because you care enough to be true to yourself. Thank you for watching. If you're ready to let go, share your thoughts below. Your story might be the spark that inspires someone else to begin their own journey toward freedom.